A boot sits half buried in the snow, and the sole of the foot inside it has come loose from the flesh underneath it. Not bleeding, not blistering, simply coming apart, like something unstitching itself from the inside. Douglas Mawson smeared the loosened skin with lanolin, bandaged it back onto his own feet, laced his boots on over the bandages, and kept walking. He was still nearly 100 miles from the nearest living person. Behind him were 2 dead companions, a vanished sledge, a grave dug into the ice, and a trail of dogs he had eaten one by one just to stay alive. Ahead of him was nothing but white ground, hidden cracks, and wind strong enough to erase his own footprints before he could turn around and see them. This is not the story of a man conquering nature. This is the story of nature taking almost everything from a man, and then asking if he still wanted to live. In November of 1912, Douglas Mawson led a 3-man survey party out onto the Antarctic ice. Mawson was an Australian geologist and explorer, 30 years old. With him were Belgrave Ninnis, a young British Army lieutenant who handled the dog teams, and Xavier Mertz, a Swiss lawyer and champion skier. Their mission was ambitious: travel roughly 500 miles across territory no human being had ever mapped, chart the coastline, collect geological samples, and return to base before the one ship capable of carrying them home for the season sailed north without them. At first, it worked better than anyone expected. For 5 weeks, the ice seemed almost generous. The men made strong distance most days. The 17 dogs pulled well across the snow. They crossed glacier after glacier, took position readings, gathered rock samples, and pushed into territory no human footprint had ever touched. Then, on December 14th, everything changed in about 4 seconds. The 3 men were crossing a glacier scarred with crevasses, each one hidden beneath a thin crust of snow. Mertz skied ahead of the sledges, his weight spread evenly across the surface. Mawson rode the runners of his own sledge behind him, his weight spread the same way. Ninnis jogged on foot beside the rear sledge, his full body weight landing again and again on 2 small points with every stride. The 3 of them had crossed dozens of hidden crevasses, exactly like this one, without a single problem. This one gave way. Mawson turned around and saw nothing behind him. No Ninnis, no sledge, no dogs. Just a clean, undisturbed stretch of snow where a man had been standing seconds earlier. He and Mertz ran back to the spot and found an opening in the ice roughly 11 feet across. They dropped to their stomachs at the edge and looked down. 150 feet below them, on a narrow ledge, they could see 2 of the dogs. One was already dead. One was alive and crying. There was no sign of Ninnis at all. They called his name for more than 4 hours. They listened. They called again. Nothing came back but their own voices returning off the ice. Eventually, they had to stop, because grief was no longer the only emergency in front of them. The rear sledge had been carrying the tent, the pick, the shovel, most of their remaining food, and some of their strongest dogs. All of it was gone. Ninnis was gone. Their shelter was gone. Their food was gone. And Mawson and Mertz were still more than 300 miles from base, with roughly a week and a half of rations left between them. So they did the only math that offered even the smallest chance. They still had dogs. If they killed them one at a time as the journey went on, the meat could feed the dogs that remained, and it could feed the 2 of them. So they turned around, and they started walking home, carrying Ninnis's loss behind them, and more loss somewhere ahead of them. Every few days, when another dog grew too weak to pull its share of the load, it became the next meal. The meat was tough to chew. The liver went down easier, so they ate more of it than they realized mattered. Neither man had any way of knowing that this might be poisoning them. Husky liver carries dangerously concentrated vitamin A, and modern researchers believe eating it in the quantities Mawson and Mertz needed to survive likely contributed to what happened next. But at the time, neither man understood that. All they knew was that the food keeping them alive seemed to be killing them at the same time. Their skin began to dry and crack. Their hair started coming loose in their hands. Their lips split open. Their strength disappeared faster than simple hunger could explain. They were eating every day, and they were wasting away every day at the same time. Antarctica did not slow down to let them notice. The wind kept coming. The miles kept stretching out ahead of them, and the snow kept hiding the next crack in the ice exactly the way it had hidden the last one. Mertz declined first. At the start, he was only tired. Then he was weak. Then he could barely walk under his own weight. Some days he could not stand without help. He grew feverish, confused, and disoriented, drifting in and out of clear thought. Mawson tried to keep him moving, keep him warm, keep him fed on what little there was. By early January, there was almost nothing left to try. On January 8th, 1913, Xavier Mertz died inside the tent. Mawson was now alone. No team, no dogs, almost no food, no one coming to help. Just one man, one failing body, one sledge, and roughly 100 miles of Antarctica standing between him and the nearest other human being. He buried Mertz in the snow and marked the grave. Then he looked at the sledge and understood the next problem. He no longer had the strength to pull the whole thing. So he took out his pocket knife, unfolded the small saw attachment built into the handle, and cut the sledge in half, right there on the ice, discarding everything that wasn't food, fuel, or shelter. Then he started walking, alone. The days got smaller. Some days he made only a mile, some days less than that. His body kept failing him in ways he didn't understand. His skin peeled at the hands and the face. The soles of his feet detached from the flesh underneath them, and he bandaged them back on and kept moving, because stopping meant becoming one more shape lost under the snow, the way Ninnis had, the way Mertz had. Then the ice tried to take him too, the same way it had taken Ninnis. Mawson was crossing ground that looked exactly like every other stretch he had crossed that week, when the surface simply vanished beneath him. He dropped straight down into a crevasse and slammed to a stop at the end of the rope tied to his sledge above him. For a long moment he hung there, in the blue darkness beneath the surface, spinning slowly, the ice walls close on every side, and the sledge wedged above him, the only thing keeping him from the drop that had taken Ninnis for good. He was exhausted, starving, poisoned, and alone, and for one clear moment he considered simply letting go of the rope. It would have been easy. One decision, one release. No more walking, no more hunger, no more cold. Instead, he climbed. He clawed at the rope with fingers that barely worked. He lost his grip and dropped back to the end of the rope more than once. Hours later, with his hands torn open and bleeding, he pulled himself over the lip of the crevasse and lay in the snow, alive, but barely able to move. That same night, inside his tent, he did something that says everything about who Douglas Mawson was. He did not simply tell himself it would never happen again. He built a rope ladder out of spare cord, tied one end to the sledge, and tied the other end to his own body, so that if the ice opened beneath him again, he'd have one more chance at climbing out. The very next day, it happened again. This time, the ladder saved him in a fraction of the time the first fall had cost him. On January 29th, 21 days after burying Mertz, he spotted something dark against the endless white ahead of him. A black flag, marking a small depot left behind by a search party. Inside was food, and a note telling him exactly how far he still had to travel. It wasn't rescue. It wasn't safety. It was proof that other human beings still existed beyond the ice. He kept going. He reached a second, larger supply cache and found food there, including fresh fruit his starving body hadn't tasted in over a year. Then one final blizzard pinned him down for days, as if Antarctica had noticed how close he'd gotten and decided to try once more before letting him go. Finally, on February 8, 1913, Douglas Mawson came down off the ice toward Cape Denison. He had survived the fall that took Ninnis. He had survived the poisoning that took Mertz. He had survived the hunger, the cold, and the crevasses that should have taken him too. He had crossed the final miles alone. And when he reached the coast and looked out at the water, he saw the ship that was supposed to carry him home already sailing over the horizon without him. It had left only hours earlier that same morning. Mawson would spend another full year in Antarctica before he ever saw Australia again. But he had already done the impossible part first. He had walked out of a place that had taken his friends, his dogs, his strength, and nearly his own body. And he had done it on foot, alone, with half a sledge and a rope ladder he built himself. The question was never really whether Douglas Mawson would survive Antarctica. He did. The real question was how much of a person can be stripped away before the part of him that wants to live finally gives up. Mawson's answer was simple: not yet.